They had been surrounded for 872 days. The ones who survived were never the same. But it wasn't the hunger that broke them. It was the moment they remembered what normal felt like and understood they could never fully return to it. Leningrad, autumn 1941. From above, the city looks almost peaceful. The streets are empty, except for a single military truck moving through a distant intersection. The city does not yet know what is coming, and that unknowing, that last hour of ordinary morning, is the most disturbing thing about it. Anna Sorokina is 38 years old, and she is standing in a queue. Cracked, dry lips pressed together, her breath rising in small white clouds in the cold morning air. There are 12 people in the queue ahead of her, and the queue moves almost imperceptibly toward a wooden counter in a dim stone archway. The frost is thick on the cobblestones beneath every foot. The bare tree branches overhead move slightly in the wind, and somewhere in the distance, so far away it could be weather, something rumbles. Anna turns her head toward the sound. The 3 people nearest her in the queue turn their heads too. It is a small movement, coordinated by instinct rather than intention, the kind of movement that a city makes in the first weeks when it is learning what it is living inside. The loudspeaker mounted on the pole at the far end of the market square crackles to life and delivers an announcement in the flat official tone of a city administration that has decided that calm language is the most important tool it has left. The announcement ends. The square goes quiet. The people in the queue resume their stillness and their waiting, as if the announcement had said something that required no response. Because by now they have learned to receive information that way. Absorb it, stand still, continue. Anna reaches the counter. A small dark bread ration is placed on a square of torn paper in her hands. The ration is significantly smaller than the paper it rests on. Both her hands are trembling slightly, not from cold, from the specific concentration of a person handling something that has become the most important object in their day. She presses the ration against her chest and turns away from the counter and walks alone down the wide Leningrad Boulevard, passing the military checkpoint barrier at the far end of the boulevard. In the stairwell of the apartment building, she passes Mikhail Orlov coming down. Mikhail is 45, wearing a worn brown canvas jacket with a torn left collar, hands calloused from factory work that the siege has suspended. They pause on the landing. The oil lamp between them bends its flame from a draft through the broken window above. Mikhail's eyes move to the bread ration pressed against Anna's chest, then back to her face. Neither speaks. The stairwell is cold enough that both their exhalations are visible in the lamplight, their breath rising and disappearing in the small space between them. Across the city in a small apartment, Dr. Vasily Petrov is seated at a wooden table covered with handwritten papers and a single candle. Petrov is 56, wearing his white medical coat over a dark wool shirt with a stethoscope resting at the collar. His right hand rests motionless on one of the papers, the index finger pointing at a specific line without pressing. The papers are covered with columns of numbers and dates in small, precise handwriting. One column is significantly longer than the others. He does not look at the numbers with alarm. He looks at them with the expression of a man who has been watching a trend for long enough that the trend has become a kind of companionship, unwanted but familiar. Beside him at the window, Vera Lisova stands looking out at the street below. Vera is 33. Through the window she can see Mikhail crossing the boulevard far below, his pace slightly slower than it would have been 6 months ago, the street otherwise empty around him. Vera's breath fogs the glass in slow, rhythmic clouds. Vera works at the public library. She stands between 2 tall bookshelves, running one hand along the spines without pulling any out, dust motes moving through the light columns as the only visible motion in the room. When she pulls a book from the shelf and opens it, her eyes move across the page with practiced speed and then stop very slightly, as if a sentence has touched something that the months of queues and rationing and loudspeaker announcements have buried. She does not close the book. She holds it open and looks at the page from a distance that is not quite reading and not quite anything else. Petrov walks his hospital corridor in the same measured pace he uses for everything now. The pace of a man who has learned that urgency costs energy, and energy is the one thing the city cannot afford to waste. 4 adult figures in civilian winter clothing wait with the particular stillness of people who have nowhere else to go. He stops at the door at the end of the corridor and rests one hand on the door frame and looks into the room beyond without entering. His expression is the expression that a medical professional develops across months of knowing something that cannot be changed by knowing it. Certain information held very still behind the eyes, the ward behind him now empty of the waiting figures who were there a moment ago. The Neva River freezes completely by deep winter and becomes the road of life, the only connection between Leningrad and the world beyond the siege. A column of adult figures crosses the ice on foot, carrying bundles and pulling a wooden sled, a military vehicle with headlights moving in the opposite direction, far across the white expanse. The sky a deep bruised purple above the black tree line of the far shore. Anna walks in the column, eyes fixed straight ahead, the ice groaning faintly beneath the group with each step, the sound low and continuous, like a note held on an instrument too large to see. Mikhail is 2 figures ahead in the column, also walking without looking back. The ice surface reflects the fading purple sky, and the breath of the entire column rises above them in a thin collective mist. Beneath their boots, the ice carries hairline vibration cracks that radiate outward from each step and fade and return with the next. In the school classroom Anna has converted into a meeting room, 20 adult civilians are seated at school desks. She speaks with her hands clasped in front of her, and the room is lit by 2 oil lamps on the teacher's desk, throwing amber light across 20 attentive faces, every face carrying the specific focus of people who need something to do with their minds when their bodies have been reduced to the minimum. The frosted windows make the classroom a sealed world. When a low, distant sound reaches the room through the thick glass, not loud enough to identify, not quiet enough to ignore, Anna stops mid-sentence, and 12 faces in the room turn toward the window simultaneously, following some shared instinct. Mikhail stands in the apartment courtyard at night, head tilted slightly upward, looking at the dark sky above the high courtyard walls. The standpipe in the courtyard corner is encased in built-up ice. Mikhail does not look frightened. He looks like a man whose mind is doing something his face cannot quite contain, an upward-tilted resting of the eyes that is less looking and more holding still. 1 star is visible through the cloud cover above the courtyard walls. The sound that has accompanied every night of the siege registers now as silence, because the mind learns to reclassify what is permanent as background. Petrov and Vera stand side by side at the hospital ward window at dawn, both looking down at the snow-covered street below without turning toward each other. The window glass is frosted at the edges, leaving only a clear oval in the center, through which the empty street is visible. In the ward behind them, 6 adult figures rest on cots beneath gray blankets. Vera holds the ward logbook open against her forearm, one finger tracing a column of numbers down the page, the most recent entry at the bottom dated in small handwriting, the numbers in the column decreasing as the dates advance. She does not show Petrov the column. He does not look at it. They both look at the street. The bulletin board at the street corner changes everything. Anna stands on her toes to see above the figures ahead. Mikhail is at the left edge of the group. The board is covered in papers with printed text. When Anna finds the specific line, the one that confirms something she has known without permitting herself to know it, her expression does not become shock. Shock is too fast for what crosses her face. What crosses her face is slower and older, the specific look of a person who has been carrying a weight whose exact dimensions they were never told, who is only now being shown the number. Anna and Mikhail remain in front of the board, side by side now, neither moving. Mikhail's right hand at his side closes slowly into a fist, and then opens again, not in anger, but in the physical way the body responds when the mind receives something it has been bracing for without knowing it was bracing. In the library, Vera moves with a new urgency, pulling books from shelves and carrying armfuls to the central reading table, where 4 other adult figures are already working, writing, reading aloud in low voices, spreading papers across every available surface. Petrov is at the end table writing with concentration, his stethoscope pushed to one side. Vera places a large leather-bound book on the table and opens it to a specific page, the spine cracked at exactly that point, the page more worn than its neighbors from previous returns, and steps back and looks at the open page from standing height with an expression that lives precisely between hope and grief and is neither. Anna and Mikhail sit on the 3rd-floor landing of the apartment stairwell at night, not beside each other, but separated by 2 steps, both facing forward, the oil lamp between them burning steadily on the stone step. They are not speaking. The quality of the silence between them is not empty. It is the specific silence of 2 people who have been inside the same experience for the same length of time and no longer need to translate it for each other. The lamp flame burns without flickering in the still cold stairwell. The sound of the building's breath, the settling of stone walls in extreme cold, is the only sound. When the morning comes that is different from the 872 mornings before it, the difference is in the quality of the light. Not brighter, exactly, but changed in a way that the body recognizes before the mind does. Anna walks the boulevard again, in the opposite direction from all the weeks before. 2 other adult figures walking the same direction at a pace fractionally faster than the pace the siege has installed in everyone. The military checkpoint barrier that had stood at the boulevard's end for months is gone. The space where it stood is just pavement. Anna stops when the sound reaches her. Not the low, consistent presence of months past, but something different in direction and frequency. Something that the body hears as different before the mind identifies why. 3 other figures on the boulevard stop too, all turning toward the same source. Mikhail stops at the frame of the scene, looking toward the same point. And then from side streets and doorways and the far ends of the boulevard, adult figures begin to emerge, walking toward the center of the street, gathering without instruction, accumulating into a loose crowd of people in winter clothing who are doing the same thing from every direction at once. Petrov walks from a side street into the gathering and stops, looking at the assembled faces around him with an expression that is the exact inverse of every expression he has worn in the hospital corridor. The same knowledge, but no longer needing to be contained alone. The gathering is not celebration, it is not grief, it is something more complicated and more honest than either. The specific quality of people who have survived something together and are only now, in the act of standing beside each other in the open air, beginning to understand what it is they have survived. Anna and Mikhail stand side by side in the crowd, not touching, not speaking, both looking forward at the same point in the distance. Around them 14 other adult figures in various states of the same expression, the face that appears when a long suspension of ordinary time ends, and the full weight of every single day inside that suspension arrives at once. The boulevard trees show the first faint trace of spring in the color of their upper branches. From above the city, the gathering becomes a small dark cluster in the center of wide, pale streets. The Never River is visible from this height, pale and beginning to show dark lines in the ice where the thaw is starting. The buildings of Leningrad stand intact, smoke from chimneys rising in the still morning air, the city enormous and quiet and marked in ways that no map will ever show. The sky above Leningrad is lightening, not to anything bright, just to the ordinary gray that belongs to any morning in any city where people are still alive and have remembered who they are. The 872 days are over. The remembering has only just begun. And the ones who understand what that means, the ones who know that surviving a thing and recovering from a thing are separated by a distance that cannot be measured in days, are standing in the boulevard below, breathing cold air, watching the light change, and trying to locate, somewhere inside themselves, the person they were before the morning the loudspeaker first crackled, and the queue first formed, and the windows first shut and stayed shut. That person is still there, changed past recognition, but still there. And finding them, that is the work that begins now. The work that nobody announced, the work that no bulletin board has ever described, the work that 872 days of surviving had been, in its own way, a preparation for. If this landed somewhere, drop a comment. Tell me which moment in Anna or Mikhail or Vera or Petrov's story stayed with you longest, and tell me where in the world you're watching this from, because this channel exists for people who want history told as it actually felt, not as it was filed away and forgotten. See you in the next one.